Quadratics! Okay, episode 4. This is learning target 6, solve quadratic equations using the quadratic formula. Um, the two methods that we've used to solve previous to this um, are really, they're really effective, but only if you have sort of the right setup. The quadratic formula will work for any quadratic no matter what, even if it has crazy, ridiculous fractions or decimals in it. Um, it works for any of them. What you'll see in this video is it's not always the fastest way to do something. While it'll always give you the correct answer, it may not be the easiest way to do it. So that's why we kind of leave it for last. And that's what we'll talk about in LT3 actually is when should we use each one? Like when would it be easiest to use factoring? Or like if this is just really hard to factor, when like maybe this is something we just use the quadratic formula for. So here is the quadratic formula. And it's a big sort of confusing looking thing. But basically you're gonna take this formula, and if you have the quadratic written in general form, you have A, you have B, you have C, so all it is a matter of just plugging these into the formula. So a couple things. Number one, and what you'll see from these examples, and at least this first one, this is not in general form yet. In order to put this in general form, we have to get the 2, or the minus 2, over to the other side. So that's the first thing that we have to do is make this a negative 4x squared plus x plus 2 equals 0. Now normally in general form this 0 is actually a y over here, but this kind of skipped a step because we know whenever we solve or find the solutions, we're finding the roots, which means y equals 0. So basically this already has a 0 there for you. You skipped that whole step. And so now this is in general form. So now the quadratic formula, negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. That gives you the roots. And you'll notice that it has a plus or minus here. Typically, we will always have two x values. That's why we always had like an x equals that or that. And so that takes care of your two values. Now all you have to do is really take the a, b, and c from here and plug them into the quadratic formula. So here's my a, and here's b, which is just a 1, and then here's c, so 2. And then I'm just going to do negative b, so negative 1, plus or minus square root of b squared, 1 squared, minus 4 times a is negative 4, times c is 2, all that over 2 times a, which was again negative 4. Alright, now the only, the most difficult part of using the quadratic formula is simplifying it. So in this case, the order of operations is huge. So what we're going to do first is work inside of the parentheses and make that a negative 1 plus or minus square root of 1 squared is 1 minus 4 times negative 4 times 2 over 2 times negative 4. Still working inside of the square root symbol over there. Negative 1 plus or minus 1 minus 4 times negative 4 is negative 16 times 2 is negative 32. So I've got minus negative 32 all over negative 8. then that equals negative 1 plus or minus square root of 33 over negative 8. And at this point, there is sometimes another step. If this square root part right here, if that is a perfect square and it comes out to be a whole number, then keep going and keep simplifying and do, negative 1 plus 3 or minus 3 over negative 8 or whatever. But since this is a non-perfect square, it's going to come out to just be this ridiculous decimal. So I would actually prefer at this point that you leave your answer like this. X equals negative 1 plus square root of 33 over negative 8. X equals negative 1 minus square root of 33 over negative 8. Okay? So I'm going to get rid of all these kind of steps up here. Like I said, the most difficult part is not like plugging in the stuff. It's actually simplifying it. So that's probably going to be your most confusing thing here. And the way to get better at this and the way to just make this less confusing is just to do it a whole bunch of times. And you'll kind of see what your common mistakes are and see kind of like, okay, I do this next and this is my order. And once you've done it a few times and seen it a few times, it'll pretty much just be easy and plug stuff in from there. So our second one, x equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac over 2a. B is 2, c is 7, a is 1. So negative b is going to be negative 2 plus or minus square root. B squared, so 2 squared, minus 4. A is 1, C is 7, over 2 times 1. Okay. Then come down here, x equals negative 2 plus or minus. Work within the square root first. So inside of the square root I have a 2 squared, which is 4, minus 4 times 1 times 7, all over 2. X equals negative 2 plus or minus 4 minus 4 times 1 times 7 is 28. Again, all over 2. So x equals negative 2 plus or minus square root of negative 24 over 2. Now there is a little bit more simplifying you can do with this. I'm going to say let's skip that for now. We're just going to leave this the way that it is. This problem is sort of an interesting case because if you think about the parabola of this, it actually won't ever cross the x-axis. That's because we have a negative inside of here. That gets into like imaginary numbers, non-real numbers, because it technically, in weird math world, has x-intercepts, even though it doesn't look like it does. That's why they're imaginary numbers. That's why I'm saying just leave your answer like this for now and don't worry about it. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But hopefully those two examples sort of give you a general idea of how to use the quadratic formula. In your before class, you've got an example here. Remember first to identify your A, B, and C. This is already in general form, so you don't need to worry about changing it to general form. Then just use the quadratic formula to to solve it, and then tell me what does that answer tell you about the graph of the parabola.